Hey guys and gals, welcome back to my channel. Thank you all for being here. I am dropping another tournament recap right now. This one's gonna be jam-packed with information. I'm gonna take you through Google Earth, looking at Lake Dardanelle in September and the areas specifically that caught my eye, and more importantly, why they caught my eye. So hopefully we'll be able to learn a little bit from my prep work, my map study going in. I'm gonna show you the areas that I fished and broke down. We're gonna talk about my day one and my day two, and we're gonna wrap things up there. So you guys, coming into Lake Dardanelle, I had a lot of confidence. I had just come off of a pretty good little run there of cash and checks in some of the bigger tournaments. Dardanelle, just by looking at it on a map, would really cater to my strengths. I love fishing up in the rivers. I love power fishing, and I love this time of year. September can be a really tough bite in a lot of places, but it can also be incredible. There's a lot of bait that's getting pushed back into the creeks, a lot of big fish. The fish start kind of feeding, and here at Lake Dardanelle, definitely saw this. About every creek I went to was loaded with shad from the mouth all the way to the back. And that, well, normally that's a good thing. I tend to think lakes fish really tough when there's that much bait readily available. So without further ado, let's just dive right into Google Earth, and we're gonna look at the areas that I was gonna fixate on and pre-fish during the tournament.
Okay, so looking at a map of Dardanelle, I started down at the south end here, and the first thing that was kind of glaringly obvious to me was Illinois Bayou. If you look at a lot of reports, there's a lot of tournaments are won in this area, and we've got strip pits here, always known to hold fish. That was one of the first things I saw. Another glaringly obvious thing was this giant spillway right here. Giant spillway. Obviously water's pretty low right here, but two things that really stuck out. Unfortunately, the things that really stick out are typically indicators of huge community holes, and I am not a community hole type of person. So I kind of ruled this whole area out despite knowing that it probably held a lot of fish. I also thought that would have not only a ton of bass boat traffic, but probably 30 or 40 kayakers as well. All right, so moving away from this part of the lake, as a lot of you guys know, I am more comfortable fishing rivers, so I kind of started to move up, and the first thing I noticed was this section right here. This is Piney Creek. I was particularly interested in a couple of things here. So if we notice, kind of moving in here, this water, it looks like there might be a couple of springs along here somewhere. It's got that really good color to it. It also has a lot of characteristics. So what I was noting about this area is right here where these two fork. Also, a lot of vegetation, it looks like. A lot of little grass fingers that come off. This area here kind of caught my eye with this little creek coming into it, so I would assume there'd be a lot of current kind of moving through here as well. Just a lot of stuff to kind of pick apart and fish. I love fishing grass. You've got a lot of characteristics in this area, and back in here I noticed that there's probably a culvert or a bridge. Always easy one or two fish spot on stuff like that. So I was really interested in Piney Creek. Another couple of areas that really caught my eye, obviously the main river, particularly these islands, these chutes in here. This stuff screamed fishy all through here. I know that I'm pretty sure there's a couple of professional anglers that have done really good kind of around this area, but it looks like there'd be a lot of sandbar drops. Obviously have a little bit of current moving through here. Probably have some backwater ponds that would probably hold some big largemouth. This whole area looked to be really good, all of this stuff. So I would go and spend an entire day of practice in this area, just fishing around the river. I mean, one could take a whole week and not even pick apart all of this stuff. But one thing that I did keep in the back of my mind is that water levels would need to be right to make this stuff really fishy. And while we were there, the water was the lowest it's been in a long time. So I did have that in the back of my mind that this may not be as productive as I thought based on the map. Another area I was looking at would be Spadra Creek here. You've got two major creeks here. I wasn't really concerned about a lot of this. My strengths would put me back in here. I was really, again, just like the back of Piney Creek. This looked to have a little bit of deeper waters, maybe probably some cooler water, probably a lot of wood, that there'd be some big resident largemouth hanging out in. So I focused some of my practice here, and then I went all the way back and concentrated in here as well. Also a little bit back here, you've got a little bit of grass on the edges. Didn't know what type of vegetation that was, but definitely noted on my practice searching and considered this entire area here. Also very close to the main river, so I'd able to kick out and fish some of this stuff if need be. All right, guys, so the very last thing I was really looking at, last couple of things I was looking at, I should note, I have this marked here, Horsehead Creek. Specifically two areas in here. I was really interested in, this is Slough Creek. Again, depending on water levels, there's a lot of, I noticed that there was a lot of wood and a lot of grass kind of around this area. And then way up here in the back of Horsehead, we've got a bridge here, another bridge, good channel swings, probably loaded again with laydowns. A lot of these creeks are. So a lot of ambush points and cover to fish in the backs of these creeks here. So I was looking at that, was going to plan to spend at least a half a day in here, coming down and checking this out. I was looking at this area right here. There's a little pipe that's got some water pushing out here. Obviously a couple of backwater ponds, riprap through here, a bunch of riprap here. So a lot of different things these fish could be relating to. Incoming water is always a good thing, so that this kind of stuff always catches my eye. So I was going to focus a little bit of time. Luckily, there's a ramp right back here, so able to kind of come in here quickly and determine whether or not this area was going to hold fish. Again, probably water level dependent. May have not been water coming out of the pipe, and this stuff may not be able to be accessed. And then one other area that kind of caught my eye was right in here. Again, I was starting to kind of look for areas that bass boats couldn't access. Looked like this might be kind of difficult to get in right here, even more so right in here. So these areas, again, a lot of riprap. Obviously, this is further up in the river, so I would imagine there'd be a lot of current kind of come along this riprap. There'd be a lot of eddies you could fish. Didn't know, probably going to be a lot muddier up in here, but all of this stuff looked like it might have potential to hold some fish as well.
Okay, so again, a lot of these creeks were loaded with bait. I decided to not target the bait, but to go back to Bass Fishing 101, target specific structures, specific targets, and go back to fishing those fish that were there to eat, if that makes any sense. So I actually had a really good practice up in Horsehead Creek, way in the back. I had about 85 inches, big largemouth, but I kind of had the feeling that I got a couple of lucky bites, if that makes sense. Just given the area and the size of the area, I knew those were resident largemouth, and I didn't think there were a lot of them. So I was going to go to Piney Creek. I actually had my biggest fish and most fish in that general area, and I caught them punching. A lot of people weren't punching, so I thought I had kind of figured something out that was pretty special. I also had some backup areas that had a lot of fish on them, so I was going to spend my day one in the back of Piney Creek. This next little 5-second clip is going to essentially sum up exactly how day one went. Pretty terrible, you guys. I really needed the sun, and I really needed a little bit of wind to make my bite happen. I spent entirely way too much time back there, and by the time that I realized I wasn't getting those big bites that I needed, I bailed on that plan and tried to scramble, went to that bridge, heard little fish blowing up under there, skipped a Rico back there, skipped all kinds of baits back there, and came up with one fish for day one. Super disappointed in that performance. I knew better. I tried to force a bite that the conditions didn't really cater to. Instead of going to a place, getting a quick limit, then maybe going back and trying to grind out for a bigger bite and a bigger coal, I made terrible decisions. That was it. Learn from it, move on. Had to put my head together, at least go out there on day two, and try to put together a limit, get redemption on the area. So let's go into day two and talk about what I did there. So day two, I didn't even go back to those punch and fish. I went out on a big grass flat, maybe 100-yard stretch right there, where there was a lot of bait, had a good amount of wind in the right direction, and I sat there for a good portion of the day. What I learned by doing that, not only did I get my limit quickly, I had some good fish that ended up moving through the area, and I learned that these Dardanelle fish, they are almost on like a time clock, meaning there were very specific bite windows throughout the day, and those fish would turn on and you'd get 2 or 3 right off the bat like that, and then it would shut off and you'd have nothing for an hour, and then it'd turn back on. It's like those fish would come out of that grass, they would eat, they'd go back in the grass, and they wouldn't. Hindsight 2020, I ended up catching like 15 fish on that flat in the matter of a few hours. Very easily, like I said, along with a couple of good fish, and got a limit pretty quick, moved up like 45 spots in the tournament. And unfortunately, since I've had a really consistent year in this series, I didn't get to call out an event for my AOI, so that event was essentially useless, except for that learning opportunity. And what that was, guys, if you've got good fish in an area, but the conditions aren't quite right, you can't force it to make it happen. Another thing, if you have an area where you know there's fish, sometimes waiting them out, trying different things, getting those fish to eat will pay off. This flat had a lot more potential than I initially thought. I'd watch bass boats come up to it, make a couple casts, not catch anything, and bail. And those fish just weren't on. They're very current dependent in Dardanelle. I learned that as well. When there's a little bit of current moving, those fish just fire up. That's pretty common for a lot of these river systems. Also, I learned a lot about the bigger fish. I ended up flipping pads for a little bit, and these pads were in no more than 8 inches of water, and I spooked a couple of big bass out from under these pads. So it's just kind of fascinating on these lakes that get so much pressure, how shallow these fish will go and kind of hang out. A lot of these fish were virtually untouchable by bass boats, but I found a lot of them there, so kind of a unique, interesting deal. Definitely learned a lot from this event, and I wish I could go back and change 1,000 things, but unfortunately, guys, as y'all know, we can't. We have these. You gotta have these bad tournaments, and this ended up being my worst tournament all year, by far. I think he ended up 50th out of the 112 anglers. So again, worst event I've had, but definitely learned a lot. Gonna take that, apply it into this next tournament. I'll be fishing on Lake Lanier in Georgia. As you all know, there's a big hurricane that's currently sitting on top of Lanier right now, so my river bite may not be a good idea. Never been to Lanier, don't particularly like spot lakes, but gonna have 1 day of practice only, and I'm gonna go and give it my best. So hope you guys learned a little bit from this. I'm gonna also include the baits that worked really well for me. Seemed to find a couple of things that worked really, really well while other people weren't catching fish in my area. So I have that whole list on Omnia's site. I made a list for this lake on a fishing report. I'll include that link in this bio. Go check it out, see what baits were really working well for me. And hope you guys are able to get on some fish this weekend. Thank you for watching as always, and we'll catch you next time.